Hello and welcome to the DraftKings Daily Trot. I'm Big Italy 42 here talking about tonight's slate. And it's a very short slate, just 6 games, not a whole lot going on, and not a lot of options at each position that you really feel good about. But I'll give you the ones that I'm looking at. Garrett Cole is your chalk play for the night for cash games. He's $12,900, which is expensive, granted, but he's a minus 200 favorite at Miami. Miami, the worst team in all of baseball, is Team Woba against righties, second worst in ISO. Among the worst in runs scored. I mean, this is just an awful offense. This is a pitcher's park, nice big ballpark for him. So you got to like Garrett Cole's options tonight against this weak Miami offense. He's got to be your top option. Other guys to consider, I like Joe Ross at $10,100. Outside of 2 subpar performances in California, he's pitched well everywhere that was not California, it looks like. So obviously that absolutely means nothing. But at $10,100, facing a weak San Diego team that has been better recently, but still one of the worst offenses in baseball throughout the season. So definitely a guy that I'm looking at tonight for a little bit of salary relief. I don't mind pairing him with Garrett Cole, but it's kind of an expensive pairing at looks like $14,000 with the two. Gives you $33.75 per player. You're going to have to get creative with your cash games tonight. There's going to be a lot of overlap, so it might be a good night to roll out some GPPs, try to find yourself those low-owned guys. You consider Carlos Martinez. I don't like the spot for him at Arizona against a team that hits very well, hits for power. They've got some speed guys on there. And Martinez has not been very good. In fact, 4 of his last 5 outings, he's given up at least 3 earned runs. Given up 5 runs in each of them, but one was 2 of those runs were unearned at Cincinnati. So this guy just has not pitched very well. And outside of an 8-inning performance against Pittsburgh, really hasn't been pitching deep either. I mean, he's been going 6 1/3, 5, 5, 5. So definitely a guy that I have reservations about at that price tag. A guy I do like. I don't love his price tag either, but he's got upside, and he actually has been pitching very well. Carlos Rodon, only 3 earned runs over his last 3 starts with 24 strikeouts to 8 walks in 22 innings. $9,800 for him against the Seattle team that obviously you've got Nelson Cruz, Mark Trumbo, a couple guys that hit lefties very well, but as a team, not a good team against lefties, below the league average. So certainly a spot where he could exploit them. We know the kind of upside he has. His biggest weakness is walking too many batters. So if he can keep that under control, I like him quite a bit tonight. Not a lot of other options that really stand out here. I mean, you've got a lefty against Tampa Bay. Doesn't really matter which lefty it is to me unless it's an elite one. Not touching Tommy Malone. I'm not a fan of Andrew Kashner against Washington here. Ruby De La Rosa is a guy you can consider against St. Louis, but very bad against left-handed batters. $3.99 WOBA allowed, one of the worst in all of baseball in that regard. And they have a lot of good left-handed bats, so makes me a little leery of him. You could look at John Neese against the Phillies, but this is a Philly team that's been hitting much better. Neese did give up 7 runs in his last start, but it was at Colorado, so you can give him a pass for that. Before that, he had gone 4 straight outings, quality starts, 3-2, 1-1 earned runs. So he's a guy you can consider, but at $8,800, you don't even really like him. I think I'll be mostly sticking to the top here tonight. Catcher-wise, Travis d'Arnaud is still my favorite option. I hope he's got a better lineup spot than 8th. Not really sure. He's been kind of up and down there, but he's been absolutely on fire recently. So $4,700 is expensive, but I like him. If Francisco Cervelli is back, then I like him. Looks like he was having some foot issues. $3,600 for him. If he's not back, his teammate Chris Stewart's only $2,300. You can look at him against the lefty and Nicolino. Other guys to look at here, Wellington Castillo against Martinez in the desert, $3,300. You know I love him in tournaments. Wilson Ramos at $3,100. And my guy that's kind of under the radar, nobody really knows about, or talks about, I should say, but he's got double-digit games in each of his last 3 and 5 of his last 8. Cameron Rupp, $3,000 against the lefty and Nice. He's hit left-handed pitching very well this season, so I'm looking his way quite a bit as well. Maybe we see one of these guys slot into a good lineup spot here at the bottom for some value, but as is, these are the only guys I'm really targeting at catcher. First base, Paul Goldschmidt, Jose Abreu. Take your pick. Abreu gets a lefty. Goldschmidt gets a righty. Abreu, obviously, much better matchup against Reynes Elias as opposed to Carlos Martinez for Goldschmidt, but similarly priced. I don't mind either one. Mark Trumbo's gotten a nice jump in price after hitting 3 home runs in his last 6 games. So $4,200 for him. He's obviously better reserved for the outfield, I'd say. Now, Logan Forsythe gets a lefty. I'm certainly looking at him at second instead. But, I mean, if you want to get creative on a 6-game slate, I guess I wouldn't mind a GPP lineup, throwing him in there at first. Another great option for you, Michael Kadire, absolutely on fire. Each of his last 2 starts, he has 26 and 28 fantasy points, a homer in each one, 3 doubles of those 2 games, so he's doing well. Ryan Zimmerman at 3,600. Cashner's been great against righties, not good against lefties. Obviously, Zimmerman being a righty, you don't love the play, but certainly a guy you can consider for some salary relief. And then really cheap, you got Darren Ruff, the guy against a lefty, and John Neese. If he's in the lineup, I think he's an okay play once again there. And then moving over to second base, already mentioned Logan Forsythe. I love him against the lefty, of course. He's got phenomenal numbers there this season. Brian Dozier at 4,300, also against the lefty. Colton Wong against De La Rosa. He's one of these lefty bats for the Cardinals that I'm looking to exploit De La Rosa with here, that 399 WOBA, so he's in a good spot. Wilmer Flores, second base, shortstop eligible. Gotta like him at 33. He's been hitting, well, multi-hit games in 5 of his last 7. Excuse me. And then a few other guys you could look at. Cesar Hernandez against John Neese at 2,900. He's an okay option. That's really about as deep as I'm trying to go. We did see Darnell Sweeney bat leadoff the other day. Not a guy that I'm actively targeting, but at absolute minimum 2K, I don't think he's a terrible option there. Third base options. David Wright's your most expensive, but while I think he's a fine play against Aaron Harang, I prefer Miguel Sano if I'm going to pay up that high at 47. Tons of upside there. He's homered, I believe, 5 times in his last 9 games. But if you're not looking that route, a little bit cheaper, Matt Carpenter, another lefty against De La Rosa in the desert. Evan Longoria gets a lefty. Seems like he's had bad numbers this season. He has not against lefties. 414 WOBA on the season. Homered and hit a double last night. Maybe he's starting to get things going. Daniel Murphy, of course, $3,800. Great price tag for him on DraftKings tonight. So I like him, a good deal. Other options down a little bit cheaper. You got Aramis Ramirez, Josh Harrison. If one or both are in the lineup, I don't mind either one against the lefty and Nicolino. You got Yunel Escobar there against Cashner, who's an okay play. Not a guy I'm a big fan of generally. But Trevor Plouffe, of course, as your swerve off of Miguel Sano at $3,600. And then Anthony Rendon at $3,300. He's an okay option. He's a guy that I prefer against a lefty, and you prefer lefties against Cashner. But at the same time, I think he's cheap enough that you certainly consider him tonight. Also, Andres Blanco, $2,500. If he's in the lineup, he's in a good spot as well. Shortstops for tonight. I mentioned Wilmer Flores, who has this eligibility as well. Jung Ho Kang at $3,900. I think he's in a great spot as well. Johnny Peralta's $3,900. De La Rosa, I mentioned, is terrible against lefties. He's much better against righties, so I'm really not excited about that play at that price, but imagine he'll be a fairly popular play either way. Cesar Hernandez, of course, at $29. And then Eduardo Escobar at $2,800. Exploded with 2 home runs last night. You're certainly not chasing that, but the guy has hit pretty well recently. He's a good GPP option for a little bit cheaper, thanks to Spencer pointing him out. And outfield options, there's a ton of guys at the top. Nelson Cruz against the lefty. Bryce Harper against a righty who struggles with lefties. Andrew McCutchen against the lefty. Starling Marte against the lefty. All these guys mash these hands of pitching. Yoenis Cespedes has actually been better against righties than lefties, so you got to like him against Aaron Harang. The guy's just been absolutely locked in recently. You look at his recent performance, and 3 straight games with at least 16 DraftKings points. Of course, that monster 67-point outing 6 games ago. He's in a good spot. His teammate Curtis Granderson as well, but I much prefer Cespedes at $300 more. Other options, Jason Hayward, Denard Span, 2 guys who are lefties, picking on pitchers who struggle with lefties. I'm looking their way. Franklin Gutierrez, a great tournament option at $4K against Carlos Rodon. David Peralta against Carlos Martinez. If Martinez has one major weakness, it's left-handed bats, 341 WOBA allowed. So definitely give him a look tonight as well. Michael Kadire, who I mentioned at first, also has outfield eligibility. Same goes for Josh Harrison. When you're looking down a little bit cheaper, gets kind of slim down here. Torrey Hunter against a lefty, $3,200, and Smiley. You don't mind that play there. Looking for some other cheap guys. Brandon Guyer at $2,900 against the lefty and Malone. Not a bad option. You assume he'll probably bat leadoff tonight. Byron Buxton's $2,500 against the lefty and Smiley as well. If he's leading off, you'll give him a look because he is very, very cheap. And that's really going to wrap things up. There's really nobody cheaper than that, I should say, that I'm going to be forcing into my lineup. Darren Ruff, who I mentioned earlier, has outfield eligibility as well. That's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.